thank you for coming. I think we had an excellent day. It was a true product of effective, efficient collaboration with the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, under the leadership of Madame Christine Lagarde. I'm so privileged to be partner in that. The CBK is so privileged to be partner in organizing this historical event. The first global Islamic bank that the IMF participates in collaboration with the Central Bank of Kuwait. We benefited a lot. I myself learned a lot from ministers of finance, governors, practitioners, standard setters, and of course, my dear colleague, dear friend, Madame Christine Lagarde. And we'll continue to benefit from this experience in the coming days and coming weeks as well. As Governor Mubarak, we need to put an action plan. It's not only talking, but we need to put and take specific executive plan in order to transform this industry into truly fruitful, beneficial for the whole society, not, as I said in my speech, affluent investors. I give the floor to Madame Lagarde as well for her comments.
Shukran, thank you very much, Governor, my friend Mohammad al-Hashel. We had really an excellent session. The great advocate of this conference was the Governor of the Central Bank of Kuwait. He very conveniently, efficiently convinced the IMF and the CEF in Kuwait, the Center of Economic and Finance in Kuwait, which is very strongly supported by the authorities in Kuwait, to organize this day. Excellent conference. I know that many of you have attended. The IMF is deeply interested in pursuing analytical work on Islamic finance. Will continue to analyze in its bilateral surveillance work the impact of Islamic finance on economic and financial stability of the countries. Will continue to insert in its financial stability assessment program that are run on a regular basis together with the World Bank, the Islamic finance dimension, wherever it has a systemic dimension. And clearly we do that not simply because it is called Islamic finance and everybody is taking a keen interest in Islamic finance those days, if you look at the numbers and how it has actually multiplied by 10 over the last decade, but also because it is a finance that brings about inclusiveness and better stability. And I think it is in the interest of that objective of stability that Islamic finance be well supervised, well regulated, that this be done on a consistent basis, and that every measures be taken in order to eliminate discrimination and harmonize existing regulations and the legal framework in order to facilitate all finances, particularly those arms of finances that develop and facilitate stability and inclusiveness. One word, if I can, Mr. Moderator. So those of you who have attended the meeting may have noticed that the two of us had to disappear briefly and returned, but were absent momentarily. That is because we had a very, very good meeting with His Highness the Emir, as well as the Crown Prince, and also with the Speaker of the House. And during those meetings, we, of course, touched on Islamic finance, but we also discussed the movement of reforms that has been initiated in Kuwait and the good fiscal position from which the country envisages to actually continue to diversify its economy and maintain good public finance equilibrium going forward, notwithstanding the new economic reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I want to add a couple of points. As just Christine reminded me I forgot to thank the CEF, Center for Economics and Finance. Again, another form of collaboration with the IMF. It's a center for training for the whole MENA region. Kuwait sponsored that excellent center to provide high quality training for the field of finance and fiscal policy and monetary policy and all economic dimensions. So thank you very much for helping us and participating in organizing this important event. The second point I would like to highlight, the Central Bank of Kuwait will remain balanced in its approach. And by that I mean, today our focus on Islamic finance. Previously we focused on conventional finance. Today our focus on Islamic finance does not mean that we're leaving conventional finance without enough regulation or importance. That sector is well established, well recognized, well organized, and well regulated, and will remain like that, and will continue our focus to foster and improve and develop that sector as well. But we're doing it in a sequence of events. So one time we do conventional and one time we do Islamic finance, but both of them are important sectors of our banking sector in Kuwait.
Thank you very much indeed, Governor. I'm going to kick us off with a couple of questions. Madame Lagarde, you talked in your opening this morning about raising your game. I pushed a little bit in my opening for details on a greater involvement of the IMF in Islamic finance. What is the next level for the IMF in terms of your involvement beyond academic as you become more proactive?
You know, I think the next level is going to be to define and then implement the way in which we will include Islamic finance into the scope of review that we conduct on an annual basis with many of our members. That is called the bilateral surveillance. And we want to analyze how Islamic finance actually contributes or not. I think I know the answer, but we have to ask the question, to financial stability, to access to finance, particularly for SMEs, particularly for those who have not had access to finance and who are, underserved from a banking point of view, to see how that is working and whether it is contributing to the to stability and prosperity in those societies.
You also called for Sukuk to be, and I mentioned this at the end, to be embedded in government debt management strategies. Yes. How quickly can something like that happen, do you think?
Sukuk and other financial instruments, because there are others, have been used for many years, decades, by some of our member states. You would find them typically in this region of the world, as well as in some part of Southeast Asia, Malaysia being clearly a very dominant player under the leadership of Governor Zeti, who's done a fantastic job in that respect. But more and more, other countries are taking an interest. So we have had recent issuances by Luxembourg, by South Africa, by Hong Kong, by London, by England, the United Kingdom, has certainly indicated a strong appetite for those instruments. We strongly advocate the regular use of Sukuk in sovereign bond issuance. For what reason? Because it's needed in order to, give an indication in terms of short, medium, and long-term trend for the markets. And that will be most helpful for the secondary market. It will be most helpful for the corporate issuers as well, in order to have, a reference at which they can actually benchmark.
Very quick question for the Governor from me, and then I'll open it up to the floor. Governor, did the discussion on regulation move this whole debate forward for you today? And you've been quite vocal on regulation in the past.
Well,
are we moving forward?
Unfortunately, I was with the
of course you were.
Christine going to His Highness the Emir and then the Crown Prince. But the part we caught at the end, I think, was very interesting and indeed provoking a lot of thinking. And indeed, we're engaged in a lot of discussion about regulation and how to harmonize and standardize as much as we can. And as I said in my speech, we need to be part of, or the practitioner and the specialist of Islamic finance need to be part of standard setter right from the beginning, right from the start. If Basel Committee for Banking Supervision can involve and engage those specialists right from the beginning, then it's much better. It will give us more harmonized and more effective regulation instead of leaving it to the discretion of national authorities, and then you'll have a lot of discrepancies and you will see moving in the opposite direction of convergence. You will see more divergent regulation among regulators.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let's have some questions from the floor. Yep. If you keep them short, the questions, and tell us who you are, gentleman right there, and then we'll come to you.
My name is Fawaz Krami. I'm from Kuwait News Agency. My question will be to Mr. Lagarde. I will ask in Arabic because. كيف تقيمون تجربتكم من وكالة الأنباء الكويتية كونا؟ كيف تقيمون تجربتكم وعملكم مع بنك الكويت المركزي في هذا المؤتمر وفي أصعدة أخرى ليس فقط في هذا المؤتمر؟
Triple A.
There you go. Short question, short answer. Yeah, right here in the front.
I have two questions. أول شيء فاطمة العميري من تلفزيون الكويت. فاطمة العميري من تلفزيون الكويت. السؤال الأول هو لك شنو أهمية بالنسبة لك هذا النوع من المؤتمرات وشنو ليش قاعد يتم الاتجاه نوعا ما إلى التمويل الإسلامي في وجود معايير بازل 3؟
شكرا على السؤال. مثل ما ذكرت يعني وذكروا الأخوان المحاضرين، الصناعة مو جديدة، صناعة قديمة، لكن بدأت تأخذ زخم وأهمية عالمية، مو فقط من الدول الإسلامية، وإنما حتى الدول غير الإسلامية مثل ما ذكرنا بريطانيا، جنوب أفريقيا، لوكسمبورغ، هونغ كونغ، كثير من الدول بدأت تتجه. عندنا خبرات كبيرة، وأنا أعتقد لابد أن مثل ما طورنا الصناعة المصرفية التقليدية وصلنا إلى مرحلة متطورة فيها، لابد كذلك من تطوير الصناعة المصرفية الإسلامية. والكويت سباقة في هذا المجال كما ذكرت في الصباح. احنا بيت التمويل الكويتي تأسس من 1978 وعندنا خبرة طويلة وممتدة في هذا المجال، لكن ما زلنا متأخرين في كثير من القوانين وكثير من المتطلبات حتى نصل إلى مرحلة من النضج نعتقد أنها كافية، حتى نصل إلى مرحلة من الاعتقاد أن المخاطر يتم تغطيتها تغطية سليمة، يتم فهمها بالشكل السليم، وبالتالي ما تكون هذه الصناعة والنمو المضطرد فيها على أسس غير راسخة. نريد أن صناعة تتطور، تساهم في نمو المجتمع، تساهم في نمو الاقتصاد، تساهم على الشمول المالي وتقديم خدمات لأفراد المجتمع بكافة الأطياف، لكن لابد أن تكون على أسس راسخة، لابد أن تكون المخاطر معروفة ومتخذ لها كل المخففات من المخاطر مثل ما نسميه الكريدت أو ريسك ميتيجنس حتى نتجنب أي مخاطر مستقبلية غير محسوبة.
Will today's conference recommendations conflict with the standards of Basel III? No.
Is it which language?
English.
English, okay. I was hearing the Arabic translation, so I was lost.
Will today's conference recommendations conflict with the standards of Basel III?
You know, I'm not sure that I have the depth and the techniques to actually address your point. What I know for certain is that the Basel III principles, whether it's on capital requirements, on liquidity requirements, on total loss absorbency capacity, all those standards have to be adjusted to the specificities of Islamic finance. And you know, whether it's the profit sharing or the loss bearing account that is associated with the financial instruments, or whether it is the existence of available, reliable collaterals associated with them, it has to be taken into account in the risk weighting techniques that are applied. So I think there is that determination to adjust, and I'm pleased to say that the IMF, which is often represented by Mr. Vignals, who is just behind you, actually sits with the members of the FSB and very often will remind the members of the requirements to move in that direction. Governor Zetti is also a very active member of that group, and those requirements and those adjustments will have to be implemented in order to actually have a reconciliation system in order to avoid discrimination. I think that's my key point, bottom line, is that we should avoid by all means discrimination either in favor or against. It should be a level playing field. That was one of the themes of my speech this morning. And to that end, it's on the regulatory territory, it's on the fiscal, on the tax territory as well, in order to adjust the tax system, in order to just, reconcile the general principles that the tax framework pursues and the features of each respective financing mechanism, whether it's Islamic or whether it's conventional.
Okay, thank you very much. Yep, question at the back there, and then we'll come to you. Go ahead.
I am Osama, CNBC. My question will be a little bit out of the topic. My question is for Madame Lagarde. On a scale from 1 to 10, how much you are satisfied about the steps that have been taken? 1, to diversify the economy, the Kuwaiti economy. 2, to face the deficit in the budget. 3, and to face the collapse of the oil prices. Thank you.
What deficit? You sure there is a deficit? That's a question mark. I have my mission chief in the room. I don't think that Kuwait actually has a deficit at the moment. It's one of the few countries in the region which does not have a deficit, but which actually has begun taking steps to reform its economy in order to gradually, over time, make sure that there is a just price for all sorts of commodities available, and to make sure that this fiscal situation remains solid and stable going forward. And I was very impressed when I met with His Highness the Emir to hear him confirm the direction of the necessary reforms for the country to sustain its growth, irrespective of significant volatility in the price of, for instance, oil. So I think it's a very encouraging process which needs to be continued, which needs to be accelerated if necessary, but the direction is good.
Okay, thank you very much. Yep, right here.
Hi, Matthew Martin from Bloomberg, and for Christine Lagarde. A question in a similar vein. You've visited many of the Gulf countries quite recently. Do you think that the other countries around the region are doing enough to respond to the low oil price environment and tackle issues like subsidies and as you sort of touched on earlier, create sort of bond programs and debt management offices to ensure that they are taking the right steps, both to address the spending and the revenue pressures that there obviously are at the moment?
I think I would add to you points about spending and revenue. I would also add the role to be played by the private sector, which is the third dimension that we considered during the GCC meeting we had in Doha a couple of days ago. I think all these issues are on the table, are being discussed. There is a very healthy debate, and the implementation phase has begun in some countries, and I'm sure will be initiated and pursued in all of them.
Okay, let's have a final question from here in the front.
Thank you. A question for Governor al-Hashel. It's Bernardo Vizcaíno with Reuters News. A question, during your opening remarks today, you mentioned that there's a fundamental change that is required in the Islamic finance sector, and that the focus should shift from a Sharia-compliant model to a Sharia-based model. How does that happen, and who makes the first steps in that regard? And following up on that, sorry, my voice is breaking now, but you mentioned an action plan with the CBK. So what kind of initiatives can we look forward to coming from the Central Bank of Kuwait in this sphere?
I think it takes collective efforts, both from the institution, the private sector, as well as regulators, given that we have enough legal infrastructure. Without legal infrastructure, we cannot proceed. That's why we always initiate ourselves and the private sector, go into the parliament and legislation in order to have the necessary foundation for that. Later on, with the help of the private sector, of course, and pioneers and entrepreneurs there, and the innovators, we can design the necessary products and the regulation as well. With the help of standard setters like IFSB. Kuwait is a founding member of the International Islamic Financial Services Board, and we recently established the IILM as well. That's another initiative that we took in order to facilitate liquidity management specifically for short-term instruments that the international market lack for Islamic instruments. Such initiatives, I think, will promote and develop the growth in Islamic finance on solid steps. Have we finished the job? I don't think so. We still have a lot to do. And we look forward to more participation, more cooperation with the international organization to benefit from the experience, wealth of knowledge at the IMF and other organizations as well. Plus, we need more initiatives from the private sector because they know the needs and demands from the economy and the people in the society, and there we can also know what kind of products and services are required to better service the society. So I think it's a collaborative, it's a collective effort. It needs a lot of institutions together. And as I said also in my opening remarks, academic institutions are required. We need scholars, trained people to understand and define risks first and then mitigate those risks. Because for us as a regulator and supervisor, we want to ensure financial stability. I don't want an impressive growth with a lot of risks, underlying risk. So I want sustainable growth, and that takes a lot of efforts from all institutions in the society.